how do you think this is going to play out in terms of affecting the price of silver? I'll put it like that.
I think ultimately this will have a major impact on the dollar, first and foremost, and on the cost of energy. But when you talk about the value of, let's talk about gold for 1 second, and because unfortunately I should have really figured it out in silver, but in gold, just last week it reached all-time highs in the second and third largest economies in the world, in China and Japan. It's reached all-time highs in most currencies around the globe, in the respect that it is the strength and the unjustified inordinate strength of the dollar, the cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry basket, that has blurred what gold and silver's real effects are. Now, since day one, you and I have talked a lot about my idea of the BRICS and what happens when the dollar loses its sole settlement status for oil, the deal we struck with the Saudi kingdom in 1974. Well, we're going to protect you, and for that, you'll value oil in dollars and take the proceeds of those dollar sales or the oil sales and put them into treasuries, recycle them, make a return. Well, look how that's working out for the Saudis right now. Not only are we inflating away our currency to worthlessness, the treasury market will go down over the last 3 years as being the worst bear market in history for bonds. And so not working out so well. And nor is our ideological aspirations perhaps lining up with the Saudis. We told them we're going green. We signed an executive order. Prior to that, we weaponized the dollar, made everyone think, hey, maybe we're next. This is the rallying cry, the coalition, if you will, of safety in numbers. You talk about hypocrisy, the way that part of the world views the United States. We invaded Iraq 20 years ago, 2003. They would tell you it was done illegally because we were in search of weapons of mass destruction. What do you know? We didn't find them.
Right.
And we topple their regime. We destroy their country. We put in a new regime, right? In 2022, they made $90 billion in oil revenue last year. They don't get to decide what to do with that oil revenue. It goes to the New York Federal Reserve. They asked the U.S. a few days ago, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, hey, can we have $1 billion, please, of our $90 billion that we made last year? And they said, no, we can't. Because they said no. They're sanctioning 14 of the banks right now for trading with Iran to buy natural gas to cool their homes in the midst of 130-degree summer. They get sanctioned. This is a country we supposedly liberated, and we still have a military presence there. We are still controlling their oil revenues and telling them what they can and can't do with it. This is the coercion and the hypocrisy that the world is pushing back against. This is the hegemony that the world is pushing back against. And when you look at a situation where the interests of the Arab nations are not aligned with the West, when you look at BRICS controlling roughly 80% of the world's oil, with Iran, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Russia, this is a problem. And when you talk about the fact that what has made the dollar the world reserve currency is indeed the protection of the Saudi kingdom, who has signed an agreement with Russia to protect them the day after we left Afghanistan in an embarrassing fashion, who has joined the BRICS, who is on the Belt Road with the other OPEC countries, all of them on the Belt Road Initiative, which in and of itself is 75% of human population, who joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization along with Iran, joining BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Not a small group, the largest regional financial and military organization on the planet. Joined the BRICS New Development Bank, told everyone in Davos, the World Bank meeting, hey, we're open to taking other currencies for oil. I was shocked up until that point how fast this thesis I've had for 3 years has sped up. And now you put us in this awful war, and there are no wars that are good. It's awful. I don't want to make a comment on that. What I will say, regardless of religion or ideology or however you want to take it, we promised all along to protect Israel. We didn't make that same promise to the Ukraine. And, I think as angry as some people are about supporting Israel, there should be equal outrage, if not more, for supporting the Ukraine. And look at it in a respect that we've given them $160 billion. What would that do to our infrastructure right now? What would that do to our border, right, to our cities that are experiencing lawlessness and homelessness? And what would that do to this country? Instead, we borrowed money that we didn't have. We're broke, we're insolvent, to give to the Ukraine, to borrow money to pay for that and for the interest. Same thing is true in the Middle East. But the difference is we promised them we would have their back, the only other democratic nation in that region. Say what you want. It was a promise. We should stick to our promises. And I'll leave it at that. But what I will say is that I think you could see what could amount to an oil embargo or much, much worse. And either way, I think you're going to see, when you see that, you got, you have all of these countries that are controlling the Suez Canal, as an example, or the majority of all of the oil movement in the world is controlled by these countries, as is the production. And when you realize that this is a situation where between the Suez Canal, which Egypt controls, of course, and the oil production, that, look, if it's an oil embargo and they just stop the flow, that's bad enough. Energy goes much higher, inflation goes much higher, and the response ought to be much higher, gold and silver. But if you see what I think will happen, and that is they just make the cut sooner than they had anticipated, and say, look, we're going to take other currencies now, because not only are we not lining up ideologically, you signed an executive order to go green. You don't need us anymore. And we have aligned ourselves over the last several years with 80% of humanity, 2 of the 3 largest nuclear arsenals in the world, and the rest of the world that doesn't want to go green. We have witnessed peace deals being brokered between us and Iran, that being Saudi Arabia, between Iran and Iraq. These are countries who have hated each other, but realize that their enemy's enemy is their friend, and China, being the adult in the room, is brokering these peace deals. The infrastructure, the chessboard, is very robust and very strong and very secure, and is being laid. What is changing and maybe really accelerating as a result of this war is the speed at which the ultimate move away from the dollar happens. And that would be my biggest concern, because remember, every country on the planet for 50 years has stockpiled dollars to buy oil. So what happens, just what happens, if OPEC says, thanks for everything, but we've gone a different direction now? And every country decides to immediately dump dollars in favor of other currencies or commodities. At the same time, most of the world is shedding treasuries. And when you think about it, it is not if you think of a historical perspective, the act of owning government debt or treasuries as a form of savings is a relatively new phenomenon. For 5,000 years, gold was that. And is there any coincidence that as the treasury market is crumbling, the worst ever, that gold and silver acquisition by the most influential, well-funded, and well-informed traders on the globe, the central banks, has never been higher? Last year was the biggest year ever. Last 18 months, the most ever. And now this year, the first 9 months of the year, that number is up 14% year over year from last year. Over 800 or 900 tons have been accumulated by the central banks in the first 9 months. Everything is in place. And what this could do, in my opinion, is greatly accelerate the ultimate demise of the dollar being the singular sole settlement currency for oil. And that sets off a chain reaction that most people in this country, I think, will only be able to define as a religious experience, because you cannot get out of the way of what you don't see coming. It's standing blindfolded in the middle of the freeway at rush hour, and that's exactly where I think we are, or the public is, in relation to the ramifications of how this could quickly spiral out of control. And God forbid it gets much worse and turns into some sort of a World War III, where you hear talks of things that are much more dire than worrying about the world reserve currency. How about just worrying about the world? And this, this world has been held together by one thing, and that is mutual annihilation, respect. These countries don't want to ever pull that trigger or push that button, But there are countries out there that would find it to be the ultimate sacrifice of martyrdom to do that to the West or to do that to Israel. And when that genie comes out of the bottle, God help us all. So yeah, this is a much bigger thing, and it's really quite scary to me. All politics, all religion aside, you know, just as human beings, it's a scary thing.
When I started originally talking to you, when we started doing these, I figured something out that was pretty interesting to me. So we're talking about with oil, when you see all these countries buying up all the silver and gold and they're backing this new digital currency with physical commodities, it's a win-win because one, they get to stick to that narrative, but also if we don't have enough silver to go green, then we can't. Because that's the thing I was always mentioning is I don't think we do. The numbers don't add up. I talk about this a lot. So if they can stop that from happening, that is, you know, that kills two birds with one stone.